Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I am your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife, Janet, and we are excited to have Misty Winter on today. She is going to be talking and exposing, I guess, the food industry and how the food industry hijacked our lives 40, 50 years ago now. And we've been living off processed foods. Unfortunately, most of us have, and it has really made a lot of us sick. So she's going to be discussing that first and foremost. So just a little housekeeping item. So we are streaming live from my personal Facebook page and the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy Facebook page. And please go to our Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube site and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And we are streaming live from the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy studio today. So check us out on all the podcast forums. Like, subscribe, comment. What else do you want to hear? So with that, I would like to introduce Misty Winter. She's going to be talking about the food industry. Misty, welcome to our show.
Yes. Hi.
Hello. So,
Good to be here.
yeah, you and I somehow crossed paths on social media, and I was impressed on what you knew about the food industry. Um, I think sometimes as a healthcare professional myself, we don't get a lot of education on food, whether it be, Jan and I are both pharmacists, and I don't think most doctors, most pharmacists don't get a lot of education on that in school. So it's very, very intriguing, and I love it when I see, somebody that's a non-healthcare professional that is really educated on food. So thank you for doing that for yourself, and let's talk a little bit about what got you interested in the food industry in the first place.
Well, both sides of my family are really sick and overweight. And probably in my early 20s, I decided that I was just going to start eating like fruits, vegetables, meat, stuff like that, and get away from the packaged stuff. And I pretty much am the only person, I'm 42 now, but I'm the only person in my family on both sides that doesn't have, or hasn't had cancer, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, PCOS. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
Um,
And I got really, really deeper into it probably about 6 years ago. I started doing research on keto because I had heard about it. And so that started the whole rabbit hole all the way down into like what is even the beginning of all this problem in the first place. And that's how I ended up finding Dr. Robert Lustig and Dr. Jason Fung and a couple other doctors. And I highly recommend anybody that wants to learn. I mean, he goes way into the biochemistry. I have a little bit of notes here, but it's probably a little bit too much. But if you look up Sugar, the Bitter Truth by Dr. Robert Lustig, he will break down every single thing as far as fructose and what it actually does to the body and how bad it is for everybody. And it's legitimately poison. It's basically metabolized in the liver just like alcohol is. And the liver is the only thing that can metabolize it. So it builds up non-alcoholic fatty liver among just pretty much any other metabolic syndrome that's out there.
Yeah, and Jason Fung has 3 books: Diabetes Code, the Obesity Code, and Cancer Code. And
Yeah, he's amazing.
basically, yeah, he is. And basically, they all come to the same. You could read one of them, and it really sums up the other ones. It's
Yeah.
basically sugar and fructose that's killing us.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing that you note about fatty liver is that we had a doctor on our podcast who actually preaches health and wellness himself and to his patients. And actually, fatty liver, so elevated liver enzymes due to excess carbohydrates and poor diet, has actually exceeded elevated liver enzymes from alcohol. So more people have
Wow.
fatty liver now because of poor diet than alcohol. You remember that
I
discussion, Janet?
I do, but let's just remember too that that's 2 things that we're putting on ourselves in American culture. So, I mean, to me, that's just tragic because it's all lifestyle issues. It's choices. It's not genetic. It's what we are doing day in and day out to ourselves that
Mm-hmm.
we have decisions and choices over. It's not rocket science. This is something that we all can learn from and move forward and change our lives and our outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Misty, high fructose corn syrup. You know a
Ugh.
lot. Yeah, you know a lot about how the industry was hijacked by them. Um, back in the 70s, and you're going to give us a little bit of information on that, with people's names and why it happened and all that. And I'm super excited to hear about that. I've heard about it before, but it's been probably about 15, 20 years ago that someone wanted to talk to me about that, and I wasn't really ready to hear it because it sounded kind of like a conspiracy theory, and I wasn't into conspiracy theories then. So a lot of those conspiracy theories come to truth. So
Yeah, talk to your conspiracy theorist friends. We're not doing okay right now.
right. So tell us how tell us a little bit about the history of high fructose corn syrup and how it got into our foods, and it's it's in a lot of our foods.
Well, it was invented in Japan in 1966, and I'm not quite sure what happened between 66 and 75, but that's when it was introduced to our market. And basically, Nixon was worried about the food prices going up and down and not being stable. And so he got his boy, Earl Butz, to figure out a solution for that problem because he didn't want to lose the election. So his solution was to just make food really cheap. They really didn't think about any kind of health problems or anything from it. They just wanted to make it cheap and keep the election. So here we go, high fructose corn syrup and making food out of buildings instead of pulling it out of the ground or where it's supposed to come from. And high fructose corn syrup is super cheap. And processed foods, the way that they keep it stable is they take all of the fiber out of it. Well, if you take fiber out of it and everything else, and the chemicals you put in there, it's going to taste horrible. So what do? Throw a bunch of cheap high fructose corn syrup in there so that it's palatable, and stick a label on it that says low fat, because if we all know who Ansel Keys is, then you know how that started. And then people just bought it. They fell into it. And, here we are years later, and people are sick and then of course it started traveling the world, countries that didn't have problems with these inflammatory diseases and metabolic syndromes. Now they are, and it's following high fructose corn syrup and packaged foods.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, you think about the 70s and the 80s, it was all about low fat, and carbs were good, and fortunately, I think a lot of us are coming around to that. Unfortunately, there's so many processed foods. Most processed foods are so high. Yeah, they're so high in carbohydrates, and so many people are literally addicted to them that it's hard to get away from them. Janet,
Sugar and carb addiction is real. It's very real.
Well, well, I also think that there's such a difference as to how you feel versus something that's natural that comes from the ground versus something that comes from a box. Because, let's face it, an apple, once you're done eating that, you're full. You can eat, how many bars, how many cookies, how many bowls of cereal without feeling the same. So, it interacts in our body differently. So
it does. It blocks leptin, and
right.
It causes other hormonal issues that make you feel like you're just not even satiated, so you want to eat more of it.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. And I think as a species, we want to eat until we feel full. And if we're not full, then it's like, okay, what else do I have in my pantry or my refrigerator? And if we're not shopping the external part of the grocery store or going and getting fresh foods, then, those long lasting packages on the shelf are probably really starving our bodies. I mean, we're getting calories, but we're starving ourselves from other nutrients and actually feeling healthy and good.
It's not even good calories at that point, though.
Yeah.
Really, it's not. And then the whole low fat craze, when that started, they didn't even do the study correctly. Back when Ansel Keys did the 7-country study, they didn't even do it correctly. They just associated, well, these people eat fat and then they have heart disease. They didn't remove anything. They didn't remove the fat and then do more studying to see if anything changed. So they just came up with it. And then they also don't recognize, well, maybe they do now more so, but there's 2 different kinds of LDL. So they were saying that having high LDL is going to cause the plaque and everything, all this other buildup. Well, the large buoyant LDL that you get if you have a high fat diet doesn't get stuck in anything. And then it's the small, dense LDL is the stuff that gets stuck and gets built up and causes the plaque. Well, high fructose corn syrup causes that small, dense LDL, and it causes it to build up. So that's another thing that they also didn't get correct when they did that back in the 70s.
It's a small particle size with cholesterol that's a problem,
Yeah,
and
yep,
you could
exactly.
actually argue that, I don't think cholesterol is really necessarily the problem. I think it's insulin resistance is probably a lot bigger problem,
Huge.
especially when you look at the risk for cardiovascular disease. Um, there are many people out there that have a very normal cholesterol, but they eat like crap and they have, insulin resistance and they have a heart attack. So, and there's many stories out there of people that have cholesterols that are really, really elevated and they don't have heart attacks. So I don't believe it's cholesterol. Janet, do you have any comments on that?
Oh, I do because when we were in school, in pharmacy school, we were taught, the low fat diet and the statins and, how that was going to solve all the heart attacks and cardiovascular events that were happening in our country. And if you look at the statistics today, it is still the number one killer. We have not put a dent in it. In fact, I think it's worse. So it is safe to say that we haven't found in traditional medicine the smoking gun. And when we actually attack cholesterol, I think we're wrong a little bit because we need that actual structure in our body for every cell. So if we eliminate that and take away cholesterol, then you end up with people that have joints and injuries to their muscles and things that aren't repairing. So I feel like we're missing the mark. So the first thing I think to start with is maybe to go back to what are we doing in our life to get to this point? And diet seems to be a great place to start. So, inflammation definitely does happen when we just, swallow ourselves in fructose or any kind of sugar for that matter, whether it be alcohol sugar or the fructose. So I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me.
It's not necessarily acute either. It's over time. It's not
Correct.
like immediate. You have a donut and you're not going to end up with diabetes, but you continuously keep that insulin, and then of course the inflammation on top of it, and yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you keep taxing your pancreas with too many carbohydrates, and eventually your pancreas will be overtaxed and it will not be able to respond, and you will need a lot more insulin to respond to any carbohydrates you eat.
That's one
And
thing I don't understand. People that are type 2 diabetic, why don't they put two and two together? Like, hey, I keep needing more and more insulin because I'm continuing to eat carbohydrates and I'm insulin resistant, and it just keeps getting worse and progressive. And remove the problem, remove the need for the insulin in the first place. And
well, I think, and Janet can hopefully add on to this also. I think our healthcare system has failed those people, Misty.
Oh,
big
yeah.
time, big
Um,
time.
you know, Janet and I learned in pharmacy school, when you have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, you're supposed to eat 80% carbs and just use more insulin. I mean, that is just crazy. You think about that
Yeah,
now, I just can't believe I believe that. Um, and we talk about this all the time. We do not believe in medication. Here we are two pharmacists, and we do not believe in medication to treat type 2 diabetes long term, period. It's a carbohydrate metabolism problem.
hmm,
Yes, there are some people that are, some people argue, well, there's thin people that have type 2 diabetes. Yes,
yep,
you're right.
exactly.
But if those people didn't eat carbs, they wouldn't have high elevated glucoses. Just don't
No,
eat
that's one
carbs.
of the things I love about Jason Fung is he's basically called everybody out. Even med school, he talks about in med school, he's like, they don't even teach you how to heal people in med school. They
No.
teach you how to prescribe drugs to people and sell drugs to them. And it's pretty bad when there's doctors out there that have to say, don't even listen to other doctors because these
Yeah.
guys are all just trying to make money.
Janet, what's your comment on
Well,
that?
my comment with this is that, I've had several pets that, we had a chronic condition. And the first thing you do with your veterinarian is discuss what kind of food we're going to use and how much and why. So we have gotten to a point where when we say to people, you need to lose weight or you need to do this in your lifestyle, that's actually taboo or it's woke or some crazy thing when really it could be the easiest thing and the safest thing, and you have total control over it. Nobody else can control what's putting in your mouth unless children can't, but as an adult, this is totally in your hands. So I think it's really sad that in our healthcare system that we can't give the control back to the patient and to the person and say, "Hey, this is where you can make a huge difference in your life." And why not? It's inexpensive to go back to being healthy. Being sick is totally expensive. I mean, that can, break you. So
You've had
I
that argument numerous times with people, like what's going to cost you more, a bunch of prescriptions and doctor visits and being in the hospital, or
right,
just go buy some meat and veggies, eat
Yeah,
right.
right.
absolutely. It's really that simple.
I'm not very good at math, but
Uh, so let's talk about genetics. You say, Misty, that you have a family history. You've got some family that, struggle with diabetes, cancer, and things like that. So
both.
commonly, we get some people that will say, well, you know what, I just got bad genes. So it's kind of a cop out. So, but you have taken a different approach to that. Will you tell me about that?
Well, I do believe that some people are more predisposed to have more insulin resistance than others. And of course, people's metabolisms are different. There's people that have high metabolism, there's people not. Well, um, as far as like genetics goes, I was doing a little bit of research, and the only thing that really would affect somebody as far as their biochemistry that would legitimately make them just pack weight on is a lack of being able to see your leptin. And there is some injuries that have happened to people, like car accidents and brain tumors and stuff like that, where the scar tissue breaks up that pathway and you don't see the leptin anymore. Well, you're constantly in save mode, save mode, save mode. So Robert Lustig actually has treated quite a few of those patients and saved them. And they just started packing on weight out of nowhere. And there was a drug that they found that basically steps in for the leptin. And lo and behold, they're losing the weight. They're doing just fine. But aside from that, genetically, if you are like me, that's more predisposed to, if I look at a donut, I'm going to gain 5 pounds. Just remove the problem. Don't eat it. And if
Right.
you do every once in a while, okay. But um, people that are like, oh, it's just in my genetics. Well, okay. Well, you can also fix that.
Right. And that's what I say. We can't change our genes, but
Mm-mm.
we can definitely change the way our genes are expressed.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so when people say, "Well, I just, I have a cardiovascular history in my life. My dad died when he was 45. My mom died when she was 50. I'm kind of doomed." It's like, well, no, no, you're not. You can still change the way your genes are expressed, even though you have bad genetics.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jason Fun gets into that a lot too when he talks about like intermittent fasting. And there's somebody else that I follow. His name's Thomas DeLauer. He's not a doctor or anything, but he goes through a lot of the studies, and that's pretty much all he does is he goes through all the studies that are coming out, and he'll gets on YouTube and he tells everybody about what's going on. But um, they you can trick your metabolism. You can change your metabolism. I mean, case in point, look at people that do bikini competitions. They come out of that with no metabolism, and they have to repair it and rebuild it. And so I don't really think it's healthy to do it that extreme all the time,
Right.
but you can change the way your metabolism reacts.
Well, I think one thing to be said is, and we talk about it often now, is metabolic flexibility.
Yeah.
And when you look at in the history, our ancestors, they were metabolically flexible. So it wasn't that they couldn't eat fruit. Let's face it, fructose comes from fruit. It wasn't
Yeah.
that they couldn't do that. They just didn't do it all the time.
Right.
And
It was
when
when
they
it
would,
was in season. And they could,
right, they did it seasonally, and they would also do it when they probably didn't have other things. For instance, I know a lot of people don't like hearing this, but you know, in most cultures, when you look at it, over generations and generations, the number one food source was meat. When you look at it for calories, the number one food source was meat, and they ate vegetables and they ate fruit a lot of times when they didn't have enough meat.
mm-hmm.
So it was still meat that was mostly sustaining them, and but also there'd be periods of fasting when they didn't have meat, when they were hunters and gatherers and they didn't have any food stored because it was in the winter, and they didn't have any meat yet because they hadn't, hunted, or hadn't had a successful hunt. They would fast for a couple days until they had food.
Mm-hmm. And
and
just the way that the biochemistry works within the body when you are fasting, it's fascinating. I mean, if we just, also some people argue about, oh, well, keto's unhealthy. Well, if it was unhealthy, our bodies wouldn't have the ability to do it. We wouldn't be able to run on fats.
that's a really
So,
good point, right? Yeah. Our bodies are incredibly flexible and
yeah,
incredibly resilient. I mean, the average person, I'm not saying this is healthy necessarily, but the average person can go without food for up to 30 days. That's a
Right.
long time. That tells you how much storage we have in our body, and our fat stores is a perfect way to save energy. The
yeah.
problem is when we have an overabundance of food, like most of us do as Americans, we're going to store too much of it.
hmm And then also just the way that the fructose metabolizes anyway, it's like immediate fat into the liver.
Right. That's the problem, is that we're converting it into that instead of energy and burning it.
hmm
Yeah, and that's one of the things when I think about fructose, you think that it's fruit sugar is where fructose comes from. Well, were we not made to eat that? Were we not made to eat fruits? Well, we were, but like Janet said, we were going to burn it. Okay, I don't have anything else to eat, so I'm going to eat this banana, which is pretty high in fructose, and it's going to spike my glucose. But then I've got to go chase a deer to go
Right. Yeah.
to have dinner. I mean,
Right. You're not going to eat it and go
seriously,
sit in front of the TV and
no.
watch a movie or something.
No, and and I know you love cyclists, Misty. That's a
My
laugh. That's a
favorite.
joke. But as a
Yes.
cyclist, I eat around my workouts, and I had a mountain bike race Sunday, and right before the race, I had a pure fructose gel. I mean, it was 100 calories of pure fructose, but I burnt 2,000 calories in an hour and a half or
Right.
an hour and
Exactly. If
50
you're
minutes.
burning it, you're not going to hurt
Yeah.
yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just have to, so we have to be careful with those things. If we're gonna burn it, then yeah, we can eat it.
Well, I do have a comment to say about this, though. I mean, we had an Airedale who loved to snoop through things, and he was super smart. And I had bought Shawn applesauce for his rides because I thought, well, this would give him a change, while he's riding. And the dog got into Shawn's bag of his bike gear, ate all the applesauce. I mean, every last drop of it, but did not touch the gels or the sugars or
He
all the other
wouldn't,
stuff. So
right?
the
It
first
must
thing
be
I said
gross.
when I said, no, this is what I said to him. I said, if an animal rejects, we probably shouldn't.
I mean, think
Right.
about that. A dog is an
He's,
omnivore and
yeah, there's
an
something there.
opportunist, and they wouldn't eat the gel that I was eating before my races.
No,
I mean, it
That's
just
funny.
tells you he ate the real food, but he wouldn't eat the gels.
no.
It just tells you something about those food. And
Yeah.
one thing about this, as we're on the subject, is like one of the things we talk about when it comes to eating healthy. I know it's a lot simpler than it sounds, but some people get really confused. But here's one of the simplest things to remember: if it doesn't rot, don't eat it.
Right.
Yeah.
And think about high fructose corn syrup. It is so highly concentrated sugar that bacteria and mold cannot grow in it. It's too concentrated. It'll lyse their cells. So it's preserved in itself. It's a preservative in itself. High fructose corn syrup is a preservative in itself. It won't rot. Well, we probably shouldn't eat it.
That's why Twinkies will live forever. They'll outlast us.
Right. Because there's so many preservatives. So
Yeah.
so you also have some issues with gluten. Is that correct?
Yeah. I've got a really sensitive digestive system, and I did a little bit of digging on that too. And from what I understand, it's just the way that they have over processed it nowadays. I guess way back in the day, people, well, maybe they just didn't know. Like for me, if I eat a sandwich, I'll wake up the next day and my face. I think you saw that picture, didn't you? See
I
that
did.
picture of me?
I
Yeah,
did.
it's crazy. My whole body gets inflamed, but you can really see it in my face, and um, it also upset my stomach and stuff like that. But I also can't do lactose. So it kind of does the same thing, not nearly as bad with the inflammation, but more stomach inflammation than anything. And I didn't really notice it until I cut it out of my diet for a while. And then I had it again, and I was like, I feel like crap. My body just blew up. And so,
And Jen and I have discussed this time and time again about like lactose, for instance. We'll talk about lactose. I mean, most of our cultures in America, most of our cultures, if you look at generations and generations back, we grew up, eating dairy products.
Mm-hmm.
So why all of a sudden does lactose cause problems? Well, I mean, you could maybe argue it's because even our milk is processed. You
Yeah.
know, my wife grew up on a dairy farm. She grew up drinking raw milk, and she lived, right? And you got to think, when you pasteurize milk, pasteurization, kills bacteria. And there are probably good, not probably, there are good bacteria in that milk that probably helps us process lactose, period. And that's why a lot of our gut biomes are messed up, because we have all this processed food. If we were eating real food that wasn't processed, including pasteurized, yes, you could make an argument that it saved a lot of lives, because people get sick with botulism and stuff if food is not,
Yeah.
processed correctly. But you know where I'm going with that? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's specifically just as far as people like getting sick and stuff, if they took better care of how they actually handle stuff, I mean, that would help too. But no, I think over processing stuff is absolutely one of the problems too. And I didn't even notice anything until I was about 13 is when I noticed, like, because I would just grab the milk jug and drink it out of the fridge. But as soon as I turned 13, it just, for whatever reason, I would drink milk and I'd feel really nauseous. And
Hmm.
um, I really miss ice cream. I tell you that much. But and then, like I said, with the gluten and stuff, I didn't notice it until later in life, until I really just quit eating it. But then, I look back, and like in high school, I was 210 pounds. I was really, really heavy. I grew up super poor. We ate a bunch of garbage, and I don't know. I kind of heard that same thing. Oh, we just can't afford the good food or whatever. And then once I got out on my own, I kind of cut back a lot of that stuff, and I started losing weight and didn't feel so bad anymore. But um, yeah, so I think that all of it together, the over processing, the kind of changing the dynamics of the gluten itself, and then probably cooking out anything that would help a gut, digest the
Yeah.
lactose. And that's funny. I actually listened to like an hour and a half long lecture that an immunologist gave on the perturbation of the microbiome. And like they are finding out, this was like 2 years ago when COVID first started.
Hmm.
Was it 2 years now? Anyway, um, and everybody thought that was like conspiracy theory, right? Remember that? People like, oh,
Yeah.
the gut microbiome, that's a
Yeah.
joke. You're just a quack. Well, they have even linked like babies that are given formula to having inflammatory diseases like asthma. And, I was formula fed. I have asthma. My daughter was too. She's got asthma. So they've really been able to get and see that what we put into our bodies is absolutely affecting what our bodies are putting back out. And I don't know why that seems so strange to people.
Right. Right.
Makes perfect sense to me. I mean, you
Right.
feed yourself garbage. What do you expect your body
Right.
to do with it? It doesn't know.
Right. We had a great podcast, Dr. Sabina Salinka, and she studies nothing. She's a doctor, MD, and she studies nothing but the microbiome. And she did a big study on how people responded to COVID, and people that had a good microbiome responded better to COVID. Not a surprise. I mean, 70 to 80% of our immune system, resides in our gut.
Yeah.
I mean, and our gut is our ultimate protection. It's where we get all of our nutrients, right? Most of our nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
And if our gut's not healthy, our bodies aren't going to be healthy, period.
Oh,
I mean, there's just no
no, not
way.
at all. And I don't understand why people have such a hard time. Like, I don't even know how to eat healthy. How do you not? What do you mean you don't know? Like, my mom's type 2 diabetic, and she's like, I just don't know what to do. I just keep getting sicker, and they have to keep changing my insulin. I told her, I was like, look up Dr. Jason Fung and listen to him.
Yep.
And the doctor told me that it wouldn't be good for me to cut carbs out. I'm like,
I know. I know. We hear, as pharmacists, we hear it all the time. Now, we're not traditional pharmacists. That's one of the reasons why, because we realized we were making our patients sicker.
mhm.
So, we believe in educating and empowering our patients to take charge of their own health, and that's through diet, exercise, sleep, and hormone replacement is a piece of it too, which what we do. But we got tired of hearing that. It's like, what do you mean? You just need more carbohydrate and turn up your insulin. It's like, serious? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
I mean, and when we buy it, and most people in the mainstream medical buys it. Now, you could argue that Big pharma has not argue. Big pharma, along with the food industry, which they're very, very highly correlated, um,
Unfortunately.
they've hiked the hacked the medical industry. Big pharma owns it, and they love people using more insulin, and they love new diabetics. I
It
mean,
bothers me so bad
yeah,
because I mean, all somebody has to do is just get a little bit curious and just, like I said, I got curious one day, so I ended up finding that Sugar the Bitter Truth, and I was just like, oh, wow. I
yeah,
can't believe that people just sit back and let this happen. And it's so obvious, too. It really is. It doesn't even take, like, you don't have to even be a pharmacist or a doctor to just sit down and
no,
look at this stuff and go, oh, wow.
right,
You know?
right, yeah, I agree. Back on the gluten thing and bread, I think the same thing is with that. It's like, when you read about cultures, I mean, we've been eating grains and breads for thousands of years
Mm-hmm.
without any problems. So why are there problems over the last, 30, 40 years, gluten problems and things? Probably because of the processing of the food,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
don't tolerate any grains very well at all. I mean, even rice, I just I can't handle much of it.
Yeah. And the good thing is that, as an individual, this is what we talk about on our podcast all the time, is there is no one diet that is good for everybody.
No,
None.
it's different.
And people, and if you talk to somebody and they say the only way is keto, or the only way is intermittent fasting, or the only way is, Mediterranean, then go somewhere else. You need to find out what diet works for you. I have a twin brother.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have a twin brother, and he's a bodybuilder, powerlifter, and he has a completely different diet than I do. And as well as he should. He doesn't exercise as long as I do, or as intense as I do. So his diet is completely different. Mine would not work for his would not work for mine.
Hmm.
So you got to find out what works for you. And kudos to you, Misty, for literally changing your life. I mean, from going to 210 in high school to, what are you this morning? 160?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's awesome. That is life changing, and people around you see that. You're inspiring others. Your kids see that. It's incredible. So you started a new journey today, right? At the gym, is that correct?
Well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah. Well, kind of.
Oh, one of my best friends, he is a bodybuilder, and so I was like, "All right, send me your routine." So he sent me his, and um, so that was my first day. I mean, I'm not a stranger to the gym by any means, but I'm like, "All right, focus, hardcore, diet on point, everything." So to go a whole
So,
month without even having a drink, and we'll see. Because I know the first couple weeks is going to be, that's always the biggest. Like if
yeah.
you go hardcore into something, because that's where you're going to lose the inflammation that you had, the water weight, losing some of the fat. But so the first couple of weeks will be, I'm pretty excited to see what happens.
Good for you. Well, you'll have to keep us updated on your progress.
Will do.
So as we wind up this show, Misty, I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So, what do you have a passion for?
So many things. So much. I actually really do enjoy helping people and talking about this stuff and trying to help other people get healthy and try to help other people get off of pills and stuff. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but I can point them in the right direction
Hmm.
of doctors who could help them more. And um, aside from that, grilling meat.
Good. Yeah, carnivore. I
You've
love
seen
it.
that.
Yes. And so, if anybody has any questions, Misty, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
um, Probably my Instagram,
Okay.
the real Misty Winter.
The real Misty Winter on
Mhm.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Okay, Steph, can you find that real quick? We're gonna try to find that, and we'll share that. Misty, I love your health journey. I love how you're changing lives. It's really, really, truly inspiring. I can say most people, unfortunately, um, probably gain the 50 pounds after high school by the time they're your age, instead of lose it.
I
Um, s- yeah, and I wanted
very.
to, yeah. I mean, it's really, that's really, really cool. You know, I'll ask, when I help people lose weight, I'll ask them. It's like, okay, well, what did you weigh in high school? And with men, usually men should probably, if they were a healthy weight in high school, they're probably not going to weigh what they weighed in high school, because men just develop a lot after high school. But women typically should probably be at about their high school weight, and most of their life, probably, if they were at a healthy high school weight. Unfortunately, Misty, as you know, many girls are not at a healthy weight in high school. Um, so it's just refreshing to see that you're changing lives, your life and others around you. I did want to mention too about eating healthy being expensive, and we've done a podcast on this. I believe we've talked about it before, and you already made it clear that kind of like Janet said, you either eat healthy now or it's going to cost you a lot later.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the facts. Those are the
And then
facts.
also, if you can save up by in bulk, I just bought a second pig. I'm gonna probably end up getting a whole cow here in probably about 2 months. So, and then veggies, I'm sorry, but it's like $3 at Safeway for a big bag of organic broccoli that's frozen, and
Yep.
frozen veggies are fine. They cut it and they flash freeze it, so it preserves a lot of the nutrients in them, and it's not expensive.
Right. I did a video a few months ago. I think it was in January, and I bought a McDonald's hamburger. I didn't eat it. I bought a McDonald's hamburger, and it was 400 calories. And then I went to this, and it was like $3, something like that, whatever, right? Then I went to the store and I bought a potato, and I bought some broccoli, and I bought a chicken breast from the deli. So I wasn't buying in bulk either. And that chicken breast, that broccoli, and that potato was like a few dollars. It was about the same price probably as the McDonald's burger. But here's the argument. How much of that broccoli, that potato, and that chicken breast can you eat?
Probably just about that serving. Probably
That's
about
it.
that.
I don't know about you, Misty, but I'm not a big fan of chicken, but I can only eat one chicken breast, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
And then I get full.
Same.
A McDonald's hamburger, I could eat 3 or 4 of them without stopping. I mean, so, and here's the problem. When people go to McDonald's, this is my whole thing with eating healthy, it being cheaper. When you go to McDonald's, do you really order just a hamburger? No. You might have good intentions when you're going to the drive. Right. You might have good intentions when you're going through the drive-through, but the next thing you know, you add supersized fries to it, you add a big Coke to it, and then you add their little ice cream side dish or whatever. I mean, it's just so easy if you're eating at home, you got to prepare that stuff. If you prepare your food, it's a lot harder to overeat.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And well, even just, fat itself, like if you eat a nice fatty steak, I mean, fat has more energy per gram than carbs do anyway, so you're going to get satiated faster.
Absolutely.
And you've mentioned soda, and that's a whole rabbit hole we didn't get a chance to go down. I can go off on that for days.
We'll have to have another podcast to discuss
right.
that. So Misty, I really appreciate you being on. It's
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're really inspiring. I love what you're doing. You'll have to keep us updated on your health journey, because I definitely want to follow you, and I want our listeners and viewers to be inspired by you. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for having me so much.
Yes. And tomorrow, tune in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. We will have Dr. Jared Wallen. He's a urologist, and he is going to be talking about erectile dysfunction. You don't want to miss that. We change the time to the afternoon tomorrow. It'll be 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So don't miss out. And Monday, you don't want to miss out. We're back on our regular schedule after Memorial Day. Dr. Michael Turner talking about anti-aging. So tune in to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Thank you for watching and listening.